Good morning and welcome to Frank School's 79th day of the 7th year, first video. This is my update for September continued. And I've kind of got a graphic here. I'm trying to figure out how to do this, how to represent what has happened over the last month here. And in a way, there is so much that could be said that it really becomes too much. It's occurred to me that maybe what I should do is just sort of stop and say it can't be represented. But I'm going to continue to try. For one reason, there's this Ariadne string effect, is what I call it. Ariadne is the woman who gave Theseus the ball of twine as he went into the labyrinth to unroll it, and to find his way out, he could roll that ball of twine back up. And I've said different times that recording things can be like Ariadne's string. You end up somewhere. I've got cats running all over the place. You end up somewhere and you wonder, how did I get here? Well, maybe this can function that way a little bit. Well, maybe I'll race to try to sort this out. There are main characters in what has happened over the last month. King, the father, 60 years old. His youngest son, he has a daughter that's married, that's 7, but his wife and his daughter were not here. 10 years old, his oldest son, Thomas, 12 years old, and myself, Frank, 73 years old. They were the main characters, and I've put them in the position that I would see them here, as I would teach at this big table. That's how they would be arrayed, and I would be here at the blackboard. These lines show all these interpersonal relationships, which I think were unavoidable. King, for example, his relationship with his 2 sons, his relationship with me, the same for me, the sons back and forth, King and I back and forth. And, I'm not sure, to some extent, I think I will go into that, but not today. Now, in addition to these main characters, they were, and I put animals in the middle, because just like you can see now, I've got cats running around. Always there were animals here, which was one of the purposes of the trip. In addition to these main characters, I sort of like circles around here, almost like an aura. There was my family, my extended family, my immediate family, my extended family. There were the roles that they played, and they were affected by this. At one point, I managed to take them to a sawmill. Now, the Sawyer was not there, but they got to see that sawmill, and I got to see that area. The community I live in, they were very much exposed to this community, and the community was exposed to them. I list these because really I found myself very proud of the world that they were able to come into and be able to see, and the reaction of these people. My community, with that I include friends of mine that I didn't have many that actually purposely came here in order to meet my guests, but they did come, or we found them, and the treatment was universally very nice. Churches, 2 churches, the church I attend regularly, and also the Mennonite church, which I attend sometimes. My country itself, I think of my land, I didn't know how to say this, my county, my country, my land. I don't think of it as Pennsylvania, and certainly not the United States, but this country where I live. They got to see it, and I'm very proud of it. In the month of August, when it's not a drought, it is so beautiful. They got to see an auction twice. We went to an auction that's a regular event. My neighborhood, the neighbors in general, not every single neighbor. They failed to meet some of my principal neighbors, but in general, my neighborhood, there are several stores that we went to, one in particular that we went often enough that they got to know them and got to be known there. So anyway, this is sort of like the world that they were in, and always there were these animals, as there are right now. Well, should I erase that? I'm not sure. I'll leave that for the time being. Eventually, another thing I deal with is eventually we settled down into sort of a schedule. But it was not anticipated, really. We went into this very much not knowing what we were in for. We had expectations, we had hopes, but how to sort it out? I mean, in my case, for example, I didn't even know if the boys would understand English. Now, it turned out they understand English very well, amazingly well. Especially, I think, for a young boy, only 10 years old, his English was fine. How that could be, well, that had to do with my learning that in Hong Kong, English is spoken virtually everywhere. Chinese is the principal language, but English just about everywhere. Anyway, let me go through a typical day. As it settled down, it wasn't initially like this. A day for them would begin with a walk, about a 3-mile walk from the neighbors where they ended up spending the nights and having supper. Then they would get here. I usually had the barn work done by the time they got here, because that actually turned out to be a little easier for me. At first they were doing the barn work with me, and they wanted to, especially these two. But it was easier for me to just have it done. We would have a breakfast, a breakfast. Then the academic work would begin. And as it settled down, Chinese, King would start by teaching his sons Chinese for about an hour. Or I shouldn't even say about an hour, because he tended to be very rigid in that. An hour was the plan. And, you might think, well, they know Chinese, don't they? Well, yeah, but it's like an English class for an American. And he was teaching them Chinese. Then it would be my turn after a very short break, and I would teach them grammar and syntax, which was one of the things King particularly wanted. I knew that he did. And then I would go over to the humanities, which ended up being sort of the obvious thing to do if his children were really going to be educated by me as their teacher. So I'd go over to the humanities, and then I found, whenever possible, we would go and we would sit down and I would tell them a story, but one of the major stories to come out of a chronological survey of the humanities. All right, then we would have lunch. There'd be a break. They'd run around for a while. We'd have lunch, which I would put together as best I could. Then there would be outside work. I say work. It was, a lot of us was play, and it was largely what I was doing was trying to use them to help me get things done that required 2 or 3 people that one person alone could not very easily do. After a couple hours of that, maybe then, as things settled down, and they probably would have then continued if they'd been here longer, I would show them a video clip of some kind related to the humanities, and I'll certainly have more to say about that. Then they would walk back to the farm, 3 miles, and there they would have supper. And usually after supper, toward the end, they would then watch a video related to what I had taught. So that was kind of the schedule. And I think maybe that's enough for today. This is really going to be a challenge, but at least I've got things started. Bye for now.